What is up, everybody? It's your boy, Z Money, Mr. 0-3, the regular season GOAT, Damon Vogler's most hated GM, and it's time for your favorite series of the season, Zachetology. We're talking about playoff matchups. It's been a fantastic season. We've had some fantastic playoff races. We'll talk about those just a tiny bit. But yeah, now in 12 hours, somewhere around there, will be the first round of the playoffs. And so I figured, maybe I can give you a little pre-playoff coffee podcast type shit to listen to, or maybe a little nightcap before you go to sleep if you're not an East Coaster, because this is probably coming out pretty late for the East. But anyways, let's talk playoffs. Before we go talk playoffs, just break down the matchups and talk about the conferences. So out west, we have the 1-seeded Jazz versus the 8-seeded Warriors, the 4-seeded Suns versus the 5-seeded Grizzlies, which is a flip matchup. The Grizzlies have a better record. They'll have home court. There's the 3-seeded Thunder against the 6-seeded Nuggets, and then the 2-seeded Rockets against the 7-seeded Sonics. So the story of the West is that the West is, in a way, both better and worse than it was last season. The West is better in the sense that the top end of the West is absolutely ludicrous this season. So last season in the West, there was really one truly great team, and it was the Memphis Grizzlies. And although they did go and lose to the Rockets, statistically speaking at least, the Grizzlies were head and shoulders above the rest of the league. And I usually quantify teams that have a plus-minus of 10 or greater as being true championship quality teams, with 15 or greater being all-time great teams. This season, the West has two teams that are above 15 in the Grizzlies and the Jazz. The Jazz are above 20, by the way, which is it's not that simple, and we'll talk about the Jazz because they're a complicated team, but a differential of 20 in the conference they were in makes them arguably the greatest team we've seen in the modern era, just as far as statistics go. And then on top of those two teams, we have two more teams with the plus-minus of over 10, and the Nuggets are sitting at 9.7. So that's 5 teams that are just unbelievably good championship quality. We still have yet another 4 50-win teams in the Pacific that all have differentials around 5, except the Warriors have differentials around 5. Now 5 is you're a team that's going to make round 2. So the fact that those are the 6, 7, 8, and 9 seeds in the conference is absolutely insane. And I think there's been a great barometer for how good the West has been, which is the Mobley barometer. How good does the Mobley Ghost Ship perform? And this season, the Mobley Ghost Ship did particularly bad. They were the 10th seed, almost the 11th seed, actually. So I think that just goes to show that, I think the West is a little more stratified than it's been. I think when we talk about these round 1 matchups, we may see a little less excitement, drama in the 1-8 style seed matchups. But the second round and on, and we do have this Nuggets-Thunder matchup, there's going to be some certified bangers. Out East, because I just talked about the West. The East also got better, I think. The East lost its championship team quality. I feel last season, I thought the Celtics were championship quality. And the Wizards were intriguing, and I think I could have been convinced. This season, I really don't think any team in the East is particularly good. I think the Wizards definitely got worse. The Celtics do have the star power of Cochran and Cade Cunningham, but they just do not measure up anywhere near the top East teams. I mean, the Grizzlies and the Jazz are so good, and so are the Thunder and the Rockets and the Nuggets. So the good news for the East is that the 8th seed this season was the 40-42 Miami Heat. 40-42 not being that bad. We pretty commonly have teams with an ever so slightly losing record making the playoffs. Maybe not in the West, but in the East. So we're no longer historically bad. And I've seen some of the trades that are happening in the offseason. Mobley's coming. I'm happy. I think we're pulling out of the tailspin of the East. So with all that being said, the final thing is there was a fantastic playoff race in the West. The West had 11 winning teams. The Mavericks, the 11th seed, finished at 40-42, or 42-40. So I do want to give a quick shout out to not the Lakers, to the Clippers and Doc, who moved mountains just to not make the playoffs, losing a 9-seed tiebreaker. It's just so hilarious. I mean, Doc, if you just kept Cameron Turner, think of how your life could have been different. But that aside, let's talk playoff matchups. So, I kind of skipped out on the East playoff matchup. So we'll start with the East. We'll go from the bottom up. Let me get up my little thingy-madooker so that I can go change these scores. Okay, beautiful. So the first matchup we have is the Celtics versus the Heat. And there's not a ton to talk about here. The one thing, so like statistically, there's no question this should be like a 4-0, 4-1 for the Celtics. Cade Cunningham and Cochran are just way too good for Jesus Dietz and whoever else is on the Heat. Now, the one interesting point of fun here is that the Heat actually played sans Jesus really well against the Celtics. They lost 4-1, I think, last season, but the Celtics did not win by more than 10 points ever. They did not look particularly good. And these teams are, like, the Celtics are, I don't know if I would say strictly worse, but I think they're definitely worse. They lost one notable player. Who the hell was it? Man, it wasn't Orville Stank. But it was somebody. I can't believe I'm forgetting their name. Meanwhile, the Heat, the big difference is Jesus has risen. So I think the big question is, like, even if Jesus can stop Clint Cochran, which maybe he can, you know, Jesus stopped Damon Vogler, and I don't see how Cochran is better than Damon Vogler. I think they're pretty similar players. You know, the Celtics still have Cade Cunningham, and the Heat unfortunately just don't have a single good perimeter defender. You know, Jack Susie sure ain't it, Mark Lilly sure ain't it, Maxwell Goose-Lane really isn't it. I don't love any of them. So I think the Heat are still going to lose this, but I do think this could be a little more dramatic. I think, you know, Alex, I said this before. I don't love saying this, but Alex has been putting up some pretty solid matchups in the playoffs. Like, he's always losing because his teams are awful, but he's outperforming the extremely low expectations and doing slightly better than expected. So I'll give him 2. And like, he beat the Wizards that one year. That was ludicrous. He looked good against the Celtics. So I don't know. I would love for some excitement here. But yeah, I mean, it's a losing team versus like a plus 13 team. This is well beyond the scope of what you would expect a competitive matchup to look like. Next, we have the 4-seeded Pistons versus the 5-seeded Raptors. Welcome back to the RBSL, Kyle. So great to have you back. Thank you for bringing some juice back to the East. The Pistons are an interesting team. I think they're a pub stomp team in the sense that I actually don't think they're very good, and they're just letting Emilio Zealy run train on a bunch of East teams that are trash. And so that's the only reason they look good. My Emilio Zealy take is not new. It is well said. I have shit-talked him for a long time. I think he is only good against trash teams, and when faced with superior competition, he quickly becomes an inefficient chucker. Zealy's playoff numbers have actually kind of rounded out a little better in more recent seasons, but they're still worse. And so, like, this team without Zealy is not great. Like, Jalen Johnson, I do not like, and then Thomas Beal. Those are arguably the 2 other best players on this team. Thomas Beal plays okay defense. Jalen Johnson might be just tolerable, and then it's like you have some interesting defensive big men in Roger Wade and Alfonso Criado, who are not like elite by any stretch. They're just fine. So I really think this team is only good because the East is so bad, but I don't love their talent in a playoff situation. I just think the main thing that I think is going to be a problem is that the Raptors' talent is far superior. So let's talk about the Raptors. The Raptors still have in his prime, absolutely elite Adam Hilton, and the thing that's unfortunate for Kyle is that if Kyle plays Zealy at point guard, which he's been doing all year, he's going to get matched up against Hilton, who is simply a superior player every single way. He is more athletic. He is taller. He's only a B defender, but, you know, I honestly am a big believer in athleticism and height playing a huge factor in defense, so I still think he can win the defensive battle. And he's going to take the ball to him all the time because he's a big scorer. And Zealy is like a borderline foul problem guy. So I think that makes it a really bad matchup for Kyle. Now, if we go beyond the game, also I think the Raptors just have a better roster on the whole. I know Starry has died, and for anyone who likes to talk about how, like, oh, we totally knew Bam was going to live the whole time, Starry is a perfect example of what constantly happens to athleticism-driven players. It's just that Bam Graham has been winning the dice rolls. I don't think Starry is completely dead. I think he can succeed in a playoff atmosphere given the right matchup. But Starry is still a very good defender, And then there's Zubero, who is also a rock solid player, two-way, good defender, very athletic, scores well enough, which makes the Raptors, like, in my opinion, have, like, I really am a Zealy hater. Like, it's almost like they have the three best players in the entire matchup. But all of that being said, Marco is a trash GM. He never pays attention. His team, I think this team got unlucky. His plus minus is worse than what his wins should be. He should be in the mid 50s. But, like, he needs to upload. Is he even going to upload? I don't know. And, like, will he come up with a good game plan? Will he, like, I honestly think as long as he just, like, does man defense and makes sure to give all his guards good starting minutes, that's probably all he needs to do. But Kyle is way more liable to get creative and do something nice that can take advantage of, like, for example, the absolute lack of a front court in Toronto. I don't know how Kyle will take advantage of that because he doesn't really have any great inside scorers. Like, is Paul Williams going to explode as, like, the inside threat? I don't think so. All that being said, I think the talent gap is a little too big. So I think the Raptors are going to win this one. They will have to overcome the lack of home court. But it's just like Hilton is too good compared to everybody else in this series that I just can't imagine him not pulling it off. I'm not going to go as far as 4-2. I think it will be close. But I just think the star power will take the series for Marco and the Raps. Next, we have the 2-seeded Hawks versus the 7-seeded Magic. So the Hawks are still running this very balanced lineup, this like Chavez, Aldama, Cartier, McKenzie, lots of blues. It's kind of like what Jesse, I think, wants in having all these blue players who all kind of contribute and are all kind of solid, and it turns into lots of wins. I honestly kind of hate this team. I don't get why it wins so many games. I think it'll fall hard when the East gets better. They definitely outperformed. Like, the win differential between the Raptors and the Hawks was 10 wins. The plus-minus differential was 2. So, like, I think the Hawks outperformed in terms of wins this season big time and are worse than they were last season. A lot of these guys are kind of borderline aging. Cartier is like, it's not borderline for Cartier. He's aging. But guys like Sandru Mamukelashvili, he's really the only other main aging guy. Oh, and Charles Hairston. Although I don't know if Hairston was on the team last season, was he? No, he wasn't. So really, it's Cartier and Mamu who have both been critical players for this team. Everybody are these mediocre guys who like play OKD and like are slightly inefficient scorers. So I really don't like this team going into the playoffs. The Magic, on the other hand, have a team I actually like the composition of a little more. They're just lacking the depth in a lot of areas. So like for the Magic, obviously this team is at this point basically completely driven by Ivan Miller. Ivan Miller is almost putting up 30 points a game. He's doing it on unbelievable efficiency. And then that's rounded out with like Dionisio Montalina as like the paint anchor for defense, and a bunch of questionable guys who I don't love, like Torque Construction Noise Lewis. I gotta come up with a better way to say that. Timothy Hamilton, who still is not good, but Ken is giving minutes and arguably shouldn't be given. I don't know. I'm on the fence about Timmy. Maybe he's a good defender, but he is not a good scorer yet. Tad D'Elia, who's like the ultimate like vanilla fill-in shooting guard. Like he is like the definition of fucking average. And then Ricky Baldwin. And Ricky Baldwin is old now, and he just can't score like he used to. He does pass, and he's a solid defender. But yeah, it's a bunch of like fine players. Who's going to win this matchup? I think this is going to be a nail biter, to be completely honest. I think this is going to go down to the wire. I don't know if the Hawks have a great answer for Ivan Miller. Their best defender in the paint is I don't know. It's nobody good. Like there's Proteus Bolus, who's like a B defender and is athletic. There's Gervasio, who's a C defender, but he's extra athletic. And there's Santi Aldama and Whitney Curse, who have better ratings, but they are terrible, or they're terrible athletes. Yeah, they have fine ratings, but they're terrible athletes. So I think, like, if there was a series where Ivan Miller could absolutely feast, this would be that series. For the Hawks, like, they're just going to rely on being a taller, slightly more athletic, a little more skilled, all-around team. I don't think anybody in particular is going to take over. I think, like, Chuck McKenzie has become something of a leading player for the blah, 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 for the Hawks. Sorry, very long day. And he has like the volume and he has the matchup against a not as athletic anymore Ricky Baldwin. Maybe he could go off, but I don't necessarily expect that. Like Jason Cartier is dead. I just don't know if he's under 55% true shooting on the season. I think he's more of a defensive guy at this point. But all of that being said, I just think all of these guys who I just listed, Chuck McKenzie, Gervasio Chavez, Jason Cartier, like they all get it done just a little better than the fill-in replacements against the Magic. So the Magic is like, it's all going to come down to Ivan Miller going absolutely ham. Or it'll all come down, or else the Hawks players will do better. I did not explain that well. The final point, the X Factor player for the Magic is going to be Torque Construction Noise Lewis. I feel like he's underutilized, but he can be a solid player. I don't know if he's been getting more runs since he got traded to Orlando. But him plus Ivan Miller could just be too much for the front court of the Hawks. And if that's the case, and you can get 40 to 50 points from those two a game, things could go well. Like, you got to run Dino and Ivan Miller, and then Ivan Miller's always going to foul out, so you try and get your 30 out of Ivan Miller before he fouls out, and then you have Torque come in and give you another 20. That's the path to victory for the Magic. Still, home court and the more overall strong team will always be favored, so I will pick the Hawks, but I think this could be a nail-biter. The Magic, like I said, got a little lucky statistically this season, and the Hawks got a little lucky, and I think this is actually a razor-thin one. Final East matchup, Wizards versus Cavs. The Wizards are the same team as last year, basically, like that Owen Lamb Jr. as the defensive stud, and then Bam Graham and Ricky Trapp. Well, I guess Ricky Trapp's the defensive stud too, but Ricky Trapp and Bam Graham as the main offensive weapons. It's just worse, right? So, like, Bam Graham is worse now. Like, he's really just gone as a defender. His efficiency remains the same, although his shot chart is changing. I've already said earlier how he's been dodging the dice rolls. He has been dodging them in the sense that, like, his statistics he's putting out are the exact same. But he's only doing that because he's magically having, like, career percentages in all these areas. I do not expect Bam Graham to necessarily continue having a career inside percentage as every single rating goes down. So in the playoffs, I also expect that to be true. I think an aspect of this is just playing in the East. So on a whole, I think the Wizards are a little worse. But that being said, I really hate this Cavs team. Like, Jesse just underperforms. This Cavs team with Efren Strong, Presidio, and Horacio Soto, like, that's a 3-player lineup that should be competitive in the East, and this team just repeatedly refuses to look competitive. I'm aware that Efren Strong died and is no longer, like, the leading up-and-coming potential defensive big man in the league. Instead, he's just, like, a very good defensive big man in the league. And I'm aware that, like, Presidio can arguably be a chucker, although he had a very good year this season. I talked a bunch of shit in the chat, and then Presidio went and proved me wrong. So, if he's going to be a 58.5 true shooting percentage player for the rest of his career, he's at least worth having. I don't know if I would be super psyched about owning him when he's over 26 on a max, when I know he has no chance to pop into a God mode player. But he should be rostered. It's just like, I don't know if he should be rostered for $24 million a year. And then Horacio Soto, just like rock solid, super strong, above average starter. Like, this team can do work. I do think there's obviously endless color bait here, like Kurs Edemine, Chang Han, Malcolm Benson, Luther Thomas, like Tony Mitchum. It's just garbage. It's just endless garbage. And I really wish Jesse would put real players in. And I think that's the problem, is that Brian still has the better 3 best players here. Like, Efren Strong is just a slightly worse version of Owen Lamb Jr. Maximo Presidio, although he's a very different player, is not as good as Ricky Trapp, in my opinion. And Horacio Soto versus Bam Graham is an interesting one because I really hate Bam Graham's defense. But, I don't know if Jesse knows how to stop a Bam Graham team. Like, it would be very interesting if Jesse goes, like, zone and just sees if Ricky Trapp can really beat a team in the playoffs. Because I feel like Ricky Trapp does not produce well in the playoffs. He's had one good season in the playoffs once, and, like, that was basically it. We'll see. I don't know. At the end of the day, I'm favoring the Wizards big time. And this is less about the matchups because, again, I like the Cavs a pretty good bit. But, like, Jesse is just such a perennial underperformer. I think this won't even be super competitive. I think this is like a 4. I'll say 4-1. This might be a 4-2. But the Wizards will get by. Trapp and Graham, 2 good on offense. Trapp and Lamb, 2 good on defense. And then we'll see if Jesse actually tears down like he's kind of been teasing now that I think he has his pick back. And he won't have to deal with me for getting his pick back. So this takes us to the West. So let's talk about some of these West matchups. So I'll start from the top with the 1-8, the Jazz Warriors. This one is a great matchup to talk about. The score is not worth talking about at all. This is going to be a 4-0. The Warriors, the thing to talk about with them really quickly is impressive how they won 50 games. You know, I think the Warriors got unbelievably lucky. The Warriors have some interesting pieces. Like, Blob Ford is kind of like a very Caleb Westmoreland-y style guy. He's better than Westmoreland in the sense that he's taller, but otherwise he's got some big Westmoreland vibes to him. So it's like, if Westmoreland was 6'2", would that make him magically good? Yeah, it might. And so that's kind of what Blob Ford is. Like, he still shoots way too much and is way too inefficient. And, like, that can be limited if you actively choose to do it. Jake is just choosing not to. But then Glob is actually a legitimately, like, he's the classic glue guy player. I think he's got a lot of value to a team that's already good. The problem is the Warriors, like, aren't good enough to derive a ton of value out of the glue guy yet because they are lacking the offensive edge in, like, you need the guy who can score 30 or 40 points a game. Not, like, you need the couple of guys who can do that for glue men to become useful, or else they're just doing everything else while no one else is winning you the game, if that makes sense. Steve Rogers is a fun offensive weapon. He continues to be putting up fantastic stats. His athleticism hasn't slipped yet, although he's another guy who's going to just, like, end up absolutely useless randomly out of nowhere, and the Warriors still might be on the hook for, like, $16 million salary. But congrats to Jake for making the playoffs because, like I said, I don't love this team, and, like, the West is a shark tank. So even though the stats say he got lucky, he still had a positive team in the absolute unit of a West and the absolute unit of a Pacific. So credit to him. Now let's talk about the Jazz because the Jazz are an interesting team. And while there's not a lot to talk about in this matchup, you know, the question is, like, what is the Jazz's path to the finals? Can they get there? I don't know if the Jazz are my favorite team in the West to make the finals right now. Now, that's insane to say because the Jazz, with a plus-minus of 20, may honestly have the best plus-minus of the modern era in a year where it was competitive. There might be some older teams, like when Adam had the Hattie Stitches teams that were over 20, but there was nowhere near this much competition at the same time. It was just Adam running train through people, I feel. All that being said, I don't really know what this team's plus-minus is because this team has changed so much and has been like 4 different teams. And I think this iteration of it I hate the most. So, like, obviously we had the Cameron Turner, Damon Vogler version. Then I think it was just Damon Vogler while Cameron Turner got sold. And then Damon Vogler got sold. And then we ended up with this team. Like, I see what Palm is going for. This game was shockingly, like, the sim engine, I feel like was pretty well made. But there was one mistake, which is that 3-point shooting is, I don't know if bugged is the right word, but it's definitely unstoppable and seems more or less impervious to the opposing team's defense. And Palm is clearly going after that with David Del Valle and Arden Justice, who are they're basically the 2 best 3-point shooting players in the game, with the exception of Brian Arroyo. Like, that is the holy trinity of 3-point shooters right now. So Palm is just basically going for defense and then chucking it over your head with those 3. But the problem with this current team is that I don't know if I believe in this defense for a couple reasons. Tony Pruitt, while his ratings are absolutely ludicrous, is an unathletic 6'10 guy. So, like, how will that look against a Cochran in the finals? How will that look against a Vogler in the Western Conference Finals or whenever they would fight? Vogler infamously cucked Tony Pruitt by playing 48 minutes a game against the Nuggets when I played the Nuggets way back. They're both better players, but, like, would the same thing happen? Maybe, maybe not. And then the perimeter defense of this team is arguably just bad. David Del Valle, like, yes, he gets 2.8 steals a game, But when he's not stealing the ball, he's a turnstile. He's unathletic, and he's a C perimeter defender, and he's 6'1". Like, there are guys who are lurking, like the Roland Humberts of the league, that can absolutely cook that man. So it's like, is Del Valle even playable? Like, he's getting 35 minutes a game, so he's going to get run. He's one of the best scorers. And then outside of Del Valle, Justice, and Pruitt, there's Bechtel. And Bechtel is another guy who's like, he's a great scorer, but in this insane, weird life that Palm is living, he's arguably taking the ball away from Del Valle and Justice, who are more efficient while being a bad defender at B- C+. So I don't know. This team doesn't feel like it meshes, this current version of it, but at the same time, Palm can very well just meme, dream, 3-ball everybody the whole way. So this will be a great chance to see against the Warriors what this team will look like, because I think against the Warriors, if like Palm drops a game or two, I think it will happen because the 3-ball just like doesn't decide to fall today. Because that's the whole problem with the 3-ball is like you only get 12 of them per player at the absolute most, and like if they just have a bad day, that's all there is to it. And you can unexpectedly drop games, that could be the downfall. He'll definitely make it past the Warriors because like there's just too much talent versus not enough talent. But I do think that like I don't know if I love this Jazz squad in its current iteration. Maybe Palm will prove me all wrong, but like I think it's way too reliant on the 3-point meme dream ball, and maybe that's why I'm never winning in the playoffs, because I don't like it and I don't like the RNG of it, and it's actually the best way to go. But yeah, sorry, that was my Jazz ramble. I've been waiting to say that for a long time. They're a very intriguing team. So let's go next to the 4-5, the Suns Grizzlies. I just said how I thought the Warriors got super lucky. The Suns also got unbelievably lucky. I think the Suns team is not very good. Like, for the West, and for, like, a division-winning team in the West, let's be clear. Like, in the East, this would be a team competing for the ECF. Prince Chapman is very good. He's aging. His defense isn't quite what it used to be anymore. He does still score super efficiently. Dean Stevens has kind of rounded out and cooled off into a, like, above-average starter power forward. If you can afford him, then he's fine to have, but he probably costs more than you want to pay. But he is a valuable plus power forward. Jason Love is kind of in his twilight years. He took a step back slightly this season, just statistically across the board, both in the volume and in the efficiency. Will he remain useful past this season? It's unclear. He's getting paid $37 million, which is kind of insane. But he's getting it done still at like a 25 points per game, 65% true shooting, not 65%, 60% true shooting, which is great. That's a good offense. And then defensively, he's just not very good, unfortunately. And then the rest of this team, like Diesel Buckner is interesting as an offensive threat, but is pretty bad at defense. It's like TBD on whether he'll pan out into anything great. I think he needs a plus TC. Happy Gilmore is an interesting point guard if you build your team around him correctly. He can also be a ball hog, as we obviously saw with last season's playoffs. Overall, I don't know. I'm pretty bearish on these Suns. I don't like unless they can exploit a matchup where Jason Love or Prince Chapman can like go absolutely off. I think these teams will just struggle to find efficiency. I don't think Jason Love is that like matchup proof guy anymore. And while Prince Chapman is that matchup proof guy, I don't know if he will ever take the ball enough to really carry a team to victory. And what makes it worse is they're up against the Grizzlies, who are super fucking good. So the Grizzlies, obviously, Jalen Suggs, Brian Arroyo show. The Grizzlies caught a break because that's exactly what they needed, and Barrett Din popping. I'm pretty sure he was a plus DC guy this season. But whatever. No shade to the Grizzlies. They have a good team. They chuck threes super fucking well. They have very good defenders on the front court. I think Prince Chapman will be stopped as well as you can stop him outside of the kind of elite of elite post-defensive teams like the Nuggets. And, Brian Arroyo, the big thing for the Suns is you want to get Jason Love matched up against Brian Arroyo, because Jason Love will not score against Jalen Suggs. He's just too good at defense. But Jason Love could score against Brian Arroyo, and so that's like the one hope for the Suns. Jason Love goes for 40 every game because he's matched up with Brian Arroyo, who, while Brian Arroyo is still a god-tier scorer, is actually just a trash defender at this point. So that's the path to victory, but that only gives them a chance, because even if that happens, it could still be that Arroyo and Suggs both, like, they go for co-50 bombs like we've seen happen so many times. So despite all that, I'm feeling a pretty strong Grizzlies victory here. The Suns won the division, and Jason and Max can take that one home to the bank, because I'm a little salty because I like winning the Pacific, but I think they did not catch any breaks with their playoff matchups. Like, honestly, they got screwed getting the Grizzlies at the 5 seed. Like, while I don't think I'm going to win, and I'll talk about my matchup later, I honestly think me as a 7 seed ended up with an easier matchup than the Suns as a 4 seed, just because the West is weird when teams get this good and everybody's separated by only a couple wins. You get these anomalies. Okay, next is the 3 seed Thunder versus 6 seed Sonics. The 6 seed Nuggets, not the Sonics. This is the matchup of the week, or of the round, without question. These two teams are absolutely fantastic. Lots of intrigue. The Thunder made a big move, which I really loved. I was not a big fan of Cody and thought he had been mostly getting lucky with Isaiah Todd popping, and I thought he sold his soul when he sold Jason Love for like 1 year of success when he went to the finals, which obviously I've talked about how I felt like he caught a bunch of breaks just in terms of like how his team performed in the playoffs. But I did love this Humbert move. I thought this was a fantastic acquisition, that Evan was just a little too worried about getting out ahead of his team and like not wanting to tank and churn. So I love Humbert for this team. It makes a ton of sense. Cody has a bunch of great defenders. William John, Isaiah Todd, Mac Pappas. He's always been missing kind of like that offensive powerhouse guy. Like, Isaiah Todd is kind of it. He scores almost 25 points per game on great efficiency. But there's definitely room for 2 elite scorers. The Grizz have shown us that. Humbert is that other great scorer, well over 60% true shooting, 30 points per game. And he's just so well surrounded by elite defenders that this is a great team. And they've produced well all season. While the Jazz and the Grizz unfortunately exist for Cody, which can make the timing of this window a little awkward, this is a great team. Like, Cody should be happy with this team, I think. Well, I'm sure he's happy, but I am happy with this team as well. The Nuggets, on the other hand, are a giant mystery, right? They've acquired Damon Vogler. So this team, over the last half of the season, is very different than this team in the first half of the season. So it's hard to understand how much of their statistics, really makes sense. Like, this plus minus 9.7, should it be higher or should it be lower? It wasn't exactly a Damon Vogler for Tony Pruitt swap, but I'm going to simplify it and call it a Damon Vogler for Tony Pruitt swap, which is insane, by the way. That like Damon Vogler's value got dragged through the mud so quickly. So for the Nuggets, the good news is Damon Vogler. Now, how you think Damon Vogler will perform in the playoffs, very contentious subject. And then the other part of this team is basically defense. Francis Porter, Claudio Villanueva round out what is definitely the best defensive front court in the league right now. Larry Escobedo, while I actually am not a huge fan of him offensively, and his stats, I think this season proved it, is still an elite guard defender. And then Paolo Precio is like, he's not quite a full low usage, like good defender guy, but he's just a good all around point guard. His defense is arguably his worst attribute, but it's not bad, it's just okay. And the Nuggets had like the best defense in the league this season. And a lot of that is because of like Escobedo, Porter, and Villanueva, who have been on the team the whole season. They're super good. So in terms of this matchup, the biggest thing is for the Thunder. Excuse me one sec. Sorry, taking a quick drink. The Thunder have played against Damon Vogler before and they won. And when the Thunder played against Damon Vogler and they won, I think the clear factor was that Jesus Dietz was the defensive center that could stop everything. Now, Jesus Dietz is gone and he's going to be replaced by William John, who is not as good of a defensive center. Now, Isaiah Todd is also extremely good, but he's not the defensive center that Jesus Dietz is, and he's smaller, so he's almost certainly going to play power forward. So if you're Evan, the whole goal right now is to just fucking ram the ball down Cody's throat with Damon Vogler. Now, if you're Cody, there's an argument to be made that you go and you just play zone defense because no one on this team for the Nuggets shoots threes unless we're talking about like fucking Jared Butler or Paulo Precio. And Paulo Precio makes 2 threes a game, so he's not exactly like the biggest 3-point scorer for this team. And you just let Larry Escobedo and Damon Vogler try and chuck and hope you can stop him. And then, on the flip side of things, the defense is going to be hard to break down. Evan's defense, that is. And so I think your biggest hope is that you can get Roland Humbert matched up against the small forward of the Nuggets, because the Nuggets small forwards are not fantastic. Like, Alan Miller is probably Evan's favorite guy, and he's this weird, not super athletic B defender who's honestly harmful to your team when he's on the court. but he has good defensive ratings. Or you try and get Roland Humbert matched up against Paolo Precio, who is by all means not a great defender and will not score enough to take advantage of the fact that Humbert's not a good defender. So this is going to be a banger of a series. My biggest concern, and I think the Nuggets are going to lose this, is mainly because Vogler is not great in the playoffs whenever he plays any type of quality defense. I'm not sure if he's playing against quality defense. William, John, and Isaiah Todd is right on the fringe, but I'm really worried about Larry Escobedo. Like, Larry Escobedo is going to get cooked if Cody, plays... I don't know if he'll play zone defense, but it might make sense. So maybe I'll be wrong and Escobedo will go ham, but I think he's going to look like shit. That's my biggest concern, is what Evan will do about Escobedo. I think he's a pub stomp player. When you look at how Larry has performed in the playoffs, it's been awful. We've seen this with a lot of guards when they try and go inside. So at the end of the day, this is I think the home court is the difference here. I think we see Escobedo stink it up. I think we might actually see Vogler do quite well and almost redeem himself, quote unquote, because this is a favorable Vogler matchup in my opinion. But I don't think it's enough to overcome the Nuggets or the Thunder. Blah. So many teams in my head. So with all that being said, I'm picking the Thunder over the Nuggets in an absolute nail-biter. This is a certified banger. I can just see the Evan Salt being salty about oh, David Vogler didn't shoot the ball enough. But maybe that will never happen. Finally, we have the Rockets and the Sonics. The Rockets are the Cam Turner team right now. It's not only Cam Turner, though, so this isn't like the Spurs where it was only Cam Turner. This is a very good team. This is Cam Turner and Arlen Mitchell and Richard Caldwell and Coach Beard and King Chala / Jules Jimenez. That's a very solid lineup right there. So this is a great team. Cam Turner is obviously the engine around which all of this churns. Excuse me. But, Richard Caldwell is well over 60% efficiency and scoring a shitload of points. Arlen Mitchell, 60% efficiency, scoring 15 points. Coach Beard, fantastic low-usage point guard. The Rockets are an overall rock-solid team. Their weakness is clearly in their front court. Jules Jimenez, unclear how good he is as a defender. King T'Challa, unclear how much he can score anymore. His stats looked good. He keeps getting older. He seems to be another one of those guys who's managed to dodge the TC death. Unlike a guy like Joni Starry, he's going more the Bam Graham path. But again, appears to not be a great defender necessarily. He's losing the quickness. I don't know. But overall, a very good team. The Sonics, on the other hand, had an up and down season. I think it's, in my opinion, they're clearly the best team in the Pacific. They just had Todd Burnside out for a month. Does that get them the 2 games they needed to come back and be better than the Suns? I think so. The Sonics are a pretty well-balanced team. They just don't have that super elite level talent. Todd Burnside, very solid, right below elite defender, 2-way player. Alperen Sengun came out of nowhere to be all second RBSL. Yeah, second league, all team second, all league second team. God damn, it's hard to speak. He's a fantastic scorer. His question will be he's missing one piece of the athleticism, size, ratings trifecta to truly be matchup proof. In this case, he doesn't really have the athleticism with that C- AC. So how will he fare against elite defense? Will he just be a chucker? I think that's the biggest concern. But his stats in the regular season were absolutely fantastic. And then Jalen Green, who, while he's a fantastic perimeter defender, is maybe not so good offensively. He had a pretty down year this season. He's always a high 50s guy, which in this day and age is not so good. And then Z-Money, who's the fantastic low-usage point guard. But, Z-Money is more of a guy who shores up your point guard slot and makes a great team better, but does not make a team great on its own. In my opinion, the Rockets are just too talented. They're probably just going to, take this one by way of pure force of Cam Turner. If assuming Cam Turner plays at the point guard, it will be interesting because Jalen Green and Z-Money are both pretty good in terms of size and athleticism and ratings. They're not Cam Turner, who's 6'9", AAAA, fantastic ratings, but they're about as good as you're going to get, barring some god tier player. So maybe they can limit him, but I don't really think they can. So I think Cam Turner will run through this team. Todd Burnside is a great inside defender, but how much matchup does he get against a point guard guy? I don't know. It's hard to say unless you go zone. But if you go zone, then you'll get cooked by the other players on the Rockets. So the Rockets are kind of creeping as a super good team. Oh, I just killed all the ratings. It's okay. I only have one matchup left, so I'll bring them back on screen at the very end. Yeah, so I think the Rockets take this one pretty easy. I think this is a 4-2. The Sonics might get a couple good games in there. Sengun gets free maybe. But I'm going to go with the Rockets for... Oh. No, that's the Rockets. The Rockets 4 and the Sonics 2. And that is my final prediction. So I'll put the screen up in my final edited video. But I'm picking the Jazz to beat the Warriors, the Grizzlies to beat the Suns, the Thunder to beat the Nuggets, the Sonics the Rockets to beat the Sonics, the Wizards to beat the Cavs, the Hawks to beat the Magic, the Raptors to beat the Pistons, and the Celtics to beat the Heat, giving us 2 4-5 seed upsets and otherwise right down the line. And yeah, hopefully we get some good excitement. Only 12 hours away. Until then, stay breezy. Catch you next time. Toodles.